Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah and I put new bookish content out every Thursday at 7 p.m. If you're new here, please don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. In today's video, we are going to be going over the top 10 books that I read last year in 2020. Now, these are not all 2020 releases. These are just the books that I read in 2020 that I think are the pièce de la résistance of last year. Jinx, we don't need your input. If you didn't know, I just found BookTube last year and created my own last year. So a bunch of these books that you'll see, you probably have already seen years ago. But I am just now catching up, and while I had a fantastic year, I'm so excited to continue on and read more of the newer books that are continuing to come out. So quite a few of the books on this list are not going to come as too big of a shock to you because I've probably already raved about them in previous videos, but I still want to bring it up one more time just to cap it off saying, hey, this is it. These were my favorites. And not to beat a dead horse, but I'm going to get this one out of the way first because I think everyone and their mother knows how much I enjoy this series, specifically this book. A Court of Mist and Fury. This is from the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. I absolutely love the entire series. All 4 books in it. I read them within 2 days each, and I just cannot wait for the next one to come out in February. I have already pre-ordered it, so I will definitely let you guys know how I feel about that. If you have somehow been on this earth and not heard of this series and are somewhat interested in books, then God bless your soul, I don't know what happened to you, but this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but we are in the fairy world. This does have a strong enemies to lovers plotline to it that you will fall head over heels with, and it will consume your life once you read it. And to this day, I still look up fan art of this series because of how obsessed I am. So 10 out of 10, cannot recommend this enough. I've reread this a million times and I will continue to reread this. After that, a book that I read pretty early this year that kind of got me into the whole YA fantasy genre was Six of Crows. This also got me hooked on Leigh Bardugo's writing. I'm currently reading the Shadow and Bone series, but I did read this one first, even though you really should read Shadow and Bone first. Nonetheless, I absolutely devoured this duology and fell in love with this family of characters to the point where I really thought I was one of the family members. While reading Shadow and Bone now, I definitely think I like Leigh Bardugo's writing a little bit more in this book just because it does get a little bit more descriptive and the action scenes are a little bit more spread out and more engaging than they are in Shadow and Bone. The best way I can describe this book is like an Ocean's 12 type of group that are trying to heist this maximum security prison. Like I said before, I think what shines the most in this book is the cast of characters. They all have just strong personalities and they clash but meld together in such a unique way that you will end up just having your heart pulled in all sorts of directions. And this is the one type of POV book where there are multiple different points of view, but I enjoyed reading all of them because of how much I love all these characters. I don't think I can say that enough, but if you have not read this book, I highly, highly recommend it. Another series that I read this past year that I absolutely devoured was Caraval. My favorite out of the series was Legendary, only because we finally got to see a romance between 2 characters that was kind of leading up to this whole entire 3-book storyline. Either way though, I could easily reread this entire 3-book series because each and every one of them is beautifully written and I love the plotline of each one. If you didn't know, Caraval is a moving magical circus where everything that happens in the circus, you don't know whether it's magic or it's not, and you're trying to solve a mystery while you're in it, and whoever solves the mystery gets one wish granted to them that anything is possible. 10 out of 10 read. If you love anything to do with magic, please pick that series up. After that, another must-read series duology would be The Wrath and the Dawn by Renée Ahdieh. In this book, we follow our 2 main characters, Khalid and Shahrazad. Khalid is the Caliph of Khorasan, which is a city that he rules, and every single night he takes a wife, but by the morning they have to be murdered. Shahrazad is our female main character who is the first one to volunteer to be Khalid's wife, and she is doing this to avenge not only her friend's death, death, but all the women that have come before her that have died as being his wife. And so she is trying to be the first one to not die, but also kind of kill him in the process so that this reign of terror ends. I loved this book because not only is it great representation for people of color and has a really interesting setting, but it also is enemies to lover, duh. And the plot line that Renee Ahdieh does is just beautiful, and just she gets you swept up in these tales that she spins along with the major plot line. So definitely recommend if you haven't already. Okay, this next book I'm bringing up is gonna be majorly different than the 4 I just said because it's an adult romance. So if that's not your jive, then maybe skip to the next book. But the book I'm talking about is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I absolutely loved this book. This book had me laugh, had me cry, and it just had me have butterflies. It was great. I can totally understand why this is turning into a Netflix movie because it is the perfect rom-com, and I'm so excited for it to come out on Netflix, and I hope they do it justice. This is an enemies to lovers office romance, and in it we follow our 2 main characters, Lucy and Josh. And Lucy and Josh are both executive assistants to co-CEOs of the same company, and there is becoming a new role in the company right above the executive assistant role. And so they are both vying for this opportunity, and in the process kind of get in each other's way and fall in love with each other, and then it turns into, oh my goodness, we're both going for the same job, what now? If you've never read an adult romance in your life, I think this is a great one to start with, only because the comedy is there and it's just such a fun plot line and great writing, and the relationship that's built is just flawlessly done. I absolutely love this book, and I definitely will pick it up again because I devoured it. I do have one more book in the adult romance type genre, so I will just piggyback off that real quick and get that out of the way. And this is part of a trilogy, and that trilogy is The Captive Prince by C.S. Packet. My favorite book out of the trilogy was Prince's Gambit, or the third one, I don't know, it could be a tie. This series is all about a prince of a kingdom that is stripped of his title and sold as a slave to another prince of another kingdom without anyone realizing that this happened. Everybody thinks that the prince is dead, and they don't realize that he's now a slave to the other prince. There are quite a few trigger warnings with this book when it comes to rape and sexual abuse and sexual assault, so if that's something you can't read or are a little leery of, I would stay away from it. But if you think you can stomach that, then I definitely think you should give this series a try. Those triggers are very heavy laden in the first book. They kind of fizzle out in the second, and by the third, the focus really isn't on those triggers at all. So if you can get through the first one, I think you would be fine to continue on with this series. This is a male-male romance novel, and it is a beautiful relationship between an enemies to lovers and 2 princes of 2 separate kingdoms that are constantly at war. Another adult book that I have that is not in the romance genre but is more in the adult fantasy genre is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I have talked about this book so many times, especially in my earlier videos, because this is one of the earlier books I read this year. There is a romance in this book, but it's not like heavy in description, but it does kind of keep the plot line moving, because in this book we have 2 magicians that are warring together in the night circus, and whoever wins gets to stay alive while the other one would die. But in the process of that, they find out who each other are and realize that they're in love with each other. So they kind of have to battle that as well as the circus itself. So this is a very interesting book. I feel like one read of it, you don't really grasp all of the nuances that are going on. So I definitely want to pick this up again in the near future just to kind of see what I may have missed in the first time around. Okay, so I know we took a little tandem in adult, but I'm back in YA. One of the first books that I read this year, and the reason I got into reading at all and into BookTube, was Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I read this book in 3 days, which at that time was the shortest time I've ever read a book. Now I can read one in a day. I absolutely fell in love with Simon and Baz, and because of this book, I can say that I have now read 100 books and have full bookshelves, and it's just gotten out of control. So I'm a little blaming this book, but I'm so happy I read this because it just opened up a whole new world for me. If you didn't know, this book is kind of like a riff on Harry Potter and has a male-male romance to it. We have Simon, who is our main character, who is supposed to be like the Harry Potter, but he sucks at magic. So all these bad things that are happening, he can't really fight because he sucks at magic. And his arch enemy, Baz, who is a vampire, is very good at magic, and he hates that he's always having to save Simon. And they're also roommates, so there's that tidbit. If you like Harry Potter, if you like any good feelings and butterflies and just funny situations, I think you should read this. This is an awesome read, and one I have reread at least 20 different times because it's just such a good book. Another series that I absolutely fell for this year was the Shatter Me series by Tahara Mafi. I can't really pick one book out of this series that I loved because I loved too many of them. I think the second, third, and the fourth books were my absolute favorites, and those are the ones that I tabbed the most and go back and read the most quotes from. But this is definitely such an interesting book because it's held in this dystopian type world, and the way Tahara Mafi describes this world, you can almost imagine our world almost going that direction because of how we're treating our planet right now. But we follow our main character, Juliet, in this book, who her touch is lethal, and she's the only person that has this lethal touch. And so she's been locked away in a prison most of her life because everyone she touches dies. Until one day she gets taken out, and now the government is trying to weaponize her as more of a weapon rather than being a human being. Now that I read the plotline of this first book, I really can't believe how many different directions that this book series went through, but I absolutely loved it. The ending was a little weird for me, but I still think this is a great read, and you should pick it up if you haven't already. I know this series has been around for a while. And last but not least, the last book on my list of favorites of 2020 is an audiobook that I listened to, and I'm putting it as an audiobook favorite because I think that is the preferred way to read this, listen to this. And that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is such a cool book to listen to because it's kind of like in an interview / podcast form, and you're listening to multiple different points of views of band members of a band called Daisy Jones and the Six that broke up in the 1970s, and you're trying to figure out why they broke up. And so you're taken from the creation of the band all the way through to its ending. And along this whole entire journey of listening to what is happening, you fall in love with the bandmates. And by the end of it, you really think that this was a real band that did play in the 1970s. And you try to find their songs on YouTube. I'm guilty of it. And you wish they were a real band because the chemistry between these characters is just flawless and something you don't think could be written, but Taylor wrote it just perfectly. So those are my top 10 favorites of 2020. 2020 itself sucked, but at least I found some great books to read while I was there. What were some of your favorites? Were there any different ones that I didn't mention? Please let me know down in the comments below so I can pick them up here in 2021. Other than that, I hope you guys are having a great and happy new year, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.